Father, the hour has come. Glorify your Son, so that the Son may glorify you, since you have given him authority over all people to give eternal life to all whom you have given him. And this is eternal life, that they may know you. How long are you going to live? How long are you planning on living? I mean, granted, I know that any individual's life expectancy is really up in the air at anyone's guess. You may live to be 120, or, God forbid, something tragic may happen tomorrow. But there is no denying that our life expectancies are on the increase. Exactly how much our life expectancies have increased, however, may surprise you a little bit. Did you know, for instance, that in Jesus' day, probably about 28 was the average life expectancy? Now, granted, if you survived childhood and made it into your teen years, you could anticipate living to about 50 or so. However, in colonial America, the average life expectancy still wasn't much better than that, really only about 35. It was actually 25 in the colony of Virginia. And even 100 years ago, with the dawn of the 20th century, the average life expectancy in this country was still only about age 50. Today, however, that life expectancy in just a couple of generations has increased dramatically to almost 80 years old in this country. Average life expectancy of 80 years old, and it is still going up every year. A few weeks ago at a conference, I met someone who was a policy wonk for the American Association of Retired People, the great lobbying group for older folks in this country. Do you know how they set all of their policies and all of their thinking in AARP in terms of life expectancy? He told me that they actually, around there in their offices, talk about the 100-year life. 100 years. That's what they anticipate us living and plan on living. 100 years. They may give you an AARP card at age 50, but they're doing that knowing that really you're only middle-aged, so feel good about that. So how are you going to spend all that time? What are you going to do all those years? I mean, are you really going to be retired and play golf for 35 years? And if your back is killing you already at age 45, can you imagine what it's going to be at age 95? How will you spend your life? Your long life? Well, if you're looking for answers, you actually might turn to the country of Japan. We all know, of course, perhaps that Japan has the longest life expectancy in the world. Actually, the average being about 86, 6 years longer than ours. And not only does it have the longest life expectancy, it also has the highest rate of 100-year-olds, centenarians. In fact, in Japan, they have 347 centenarians per million. In fact, one prefecture in Japan actually has 743 centenarians per million people. In the U.S., our rate is much lower, only about 232 per million. But even that, our total number has doubled since 1980. Trust me, Willard Scott has great job security. But is living that long really a good thing? I mean, can you really imagine yourself at 100 years old, dawdling around on a cane or in a wheelchair, maybe mine being a bit forgetful? Unsure that we really want to live quite that long. Japan, of course, has a different mindset when it comes to long life. They see it not only as a great possibility, but those who reach that age, they are given great respect. There's a saying in Japan, old people are everybody's treasure. The result then of that mindset in Japan is that people not only live longer, but they do also tend to live better. Take, for instance, one gentleman, Tadashi Kozaki, pronounce that right, who's 101. He dances 2 times a week. He exercises every day. And he decided 11 years ago at age 90 that maybe it was time that he gave up smoking. Another man, Masaki Hatsumi, is only 77, but he recently became the world grand master of Jiu-Jitsu. In other words, he became at that age a super ninja. And another woman, Chitsui Hakoshi, who is at age 92, still cutting hair after 75 years on the job. And she still, at age 92, shakes her clients with a straight razor, saying, when my hands start to shake, I'm going to have to retire. Obviously, these older folks are not waiting around to die. If anything, they actually are planning on living, and they plan for it today. They plan on living. They plan on living a really, really long time. I mean, we know how the Japanese are. They exercise more than we do. They eat a lot less sugar. They consume half the fat. Sharp contrast to our high sugar, high fat diets. And again, they value old age, which is in sharp contrast to the youth culture in the West. Boomers know how that was, remember? Trust no one under 30. You sang along with The Who, my generation. I just want to die before I get old. Trust me, we know that you're in your 50s and 60s. I bet you're rethinking all that, aren't you? But how long will we live? And how long will we live and plan on living impacts the way that we live today. Or at least it should. In John chapter 17, Jesus has just finished his long speech there at the table with his disciples for the Last Supper. And as soon as he concludes his remarks, John says, he immediately turns his gaze heavenward and begins to pray. After Jesus had spoken these words, John said, he looked up to heaven and said, Father. And from there he prayed. He prayed for his disciples. He prayed about what was ahead of him on the cross. And he prayed about how God had given him authority over all people. Authority to give eternal life. You know, Jesus talks a lot about eternal life, especially in John's Gospel. He says earlier in the Gospel, I am the way, the truth, and the life. When that great conversation with Nicodemus in John 3:16, for God so loved the world that God gave God's only Son, that everyone who believes in him may not perish, but have what? Eternal life. But what is Jesus really talking about with all this talk about eternal life? I mean, we think we know. The children up here already had some concept of heaven and maybe being in the clouds and being with God and seeing Jesus that day. Many of you may remember, of course, a hymn that I know that my grandparents used to sing. There's a land that's fairer than day. By faith we can see it afar, for the Father waits over the way to prepare us a dwelling place there. In the sweet by and by, we shall meet on that beautiful shore. The words of that hymn and the mindset of many suggest then that eternal life is something for the future. Eternal life happens after we die. We live this life, we work, we laugh, we live, we cry, and then we die and eternal life begins. We go up to heaven, up there, out there, somewhere. We see grandparents and parents again. There are pearly gates, streets of gold, angels' wings, eternal bliss. But if eternal life happens after we die, then maybe conversely, we don't have to worry so much about it today. That's then, this is now. And that's what many of us think about what Jesus was up to in his offer of eternal life. That Jesus was offering us a ticket to the after, that if we believe in him now, we will have eternal life then. Maybe some sort of eternal fire insurance to keep from going to the other place. But no, eternal life is an escape. It's in the distant future. Right now, many think that we are trapped in this body, this mortal coil. That we live an earthly existence with some joy, but also with pain and suffering and disappointment, until that day when eternal life starts, and we can escape with our souls flying off or floating off up to heaven. It may surprise you if that's kind of the mindset that you're thinking and have thought. But that's not the way Christians have normally thought about eternal life. that perhaps is owing more to Greek philosophy than to Christianity, more Plato than Jesus. You remember those words of the Apostles' Creed that we often say, I believe in the resurrection of the body. The body. Paul in his letters talks about Jesus' resurrection as first fruits. Jesus' resurrection of his body that the disciples could touch and see. And John calling to touch his wounds in his hands and the wounds in his side. And when he saw Jesus' resurrected body, declared, my Lord and my God. We believe in the resurrection of the body. Jesus is praying this prayer for his disciples, praying to God after his long talk to his friends. He says, this is eternal life, that they may know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent. Do you notice the verb there? Jesus says, this is eternal life. See, Jesus doesn't put eternal life in the future. This is not a future tense verb. It's a present tense. This is eternal life. Elsewhere, Jesus says, I came that you might have life and have life abundantly. Again, present tense, not future. There is, granted, according to Jesus, a future that we look forward to. A future when we know God fully, or as Paul says in 1 Corinthians 13, then we will see fully face to face, even if now we see in a mirror dimly. But the point is, of course, we do see in a mirror, even if dimly. We recognize God's presence here and now. And what we see now gives us hope for the future. And conversely, our hope for the future impacts what we see now and how we live now. One of my favorite writers, C.S. Lewis, writes in his book, The Great Divorce, about the definition of hell as eternal life without God. Framed another way, he suggests that people in the present get in the future what they are working now for. What you ask for today is what you will get tomorrow. What you work for in this life is what you will get in the next. Lewis suggests, Jesus suggests, that if we are looking for eternity, it begins not some point in the future, but that eternity begins today. So if you're thinking about eternity, if you're thinking about the future, what does your future actually hold? You can probably tell a lot by your existence, your life, your living today. High fat, high sugar diet, yeah, your body's not going to do so well when it hits 100. Want to sing along with Roger Daltrey that you want to die before you get old? Well, you probably will. Maybe literally, most likely figuratively, living a dead life while your body keeps going. Live today with resentment and hostility, and you're going to have to live with that for a really long time, maybe forever. Live with no hope, with despair, and you will find there will be none for you in the future. Live selfishly with only yourself in mind, closed off from others and community, with no one else in mind. And chances are no one else will have you in mind either. Live apart from God without attending to God, and you may in fact get what you ask for. But live the other way. Live with eternity in mind. Live with the understanding that the future starts now. Eternity begins today. Living connected to God and to God's people and to God's will for you in your life. And eternity is just a continuation. Prayer, worship, community, generosity, these as a part of your day-to-day living, and they will keep living. And you will keep living day after day after day from here to eternity. You will get exactly what you've been working for, exactly what you have been asking for. Attend to a life with God. Bring God closer to you this day. And eternity is certainly yours. eternity will begin for you this day until God makes it complete. If you will see in a mirror dimly this day, then be guaranteed you will see it and see God fully face to face. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.